Dima Ivanov had always been a man of simple pleasures, his life defined by the vast fields he tended and the love he shared with his wife, Lena. Together, they had built a life filled with dreams of the future, dreams that revolved around the family they longed to create. Their small farmhouse stood as a testament to their hard work and dedication, nestled in the heart of the countryside, surrounded by the fertile land that had become their livelihood. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the fields, Dima and Lena would sit on the porch, imagining the life that awaited them. They spoke of the children they would have, picturing them running through the fields, their laughter echoing through the hills. They dreamed of a home filled with warmth and love, where the sound of tiny footsteps would fill the halls, and the joy of raising a family would bring them closer together. That Lena's pregnancy was the culmination of these dreams. When she first told Dima the news, he had lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in joy. They had waited for this moment for so long, and now it was finally happening. The farmhouse buzzed with excitement as they prepared for the arrival of their child. Dima worked tirelessly to make sure everything was perfect, while Lena meticulously planned every detail, from the nursery to the name they would give their baby. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The day Lena went into labor was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Dima drove Lena to the hospital, holding her hand the entire way, whispering reassurances and promises of a bright future. But as the hours dragged on, the mood in the delivery room shifted from joy to anxiety. The doctors' faces grew grim as complications arose, and Lena's condition worsened. Dima stood by her side, his heart pounding in his chest, praying for a miracle. Time seemed to stand still as the medical team worked frantically, trying to save both mother and child. The sterile scent of the hospital, the beeping of machines, and the hurried whispers of the doctors all blurred into a nightmarish haze. Dima could only watch, helpless, as the situation spiraled out of control. When the doctor finally approached him, Dima saw the answer in his eyes before he even spoke. Both Lena and the baby were gone. In that instant, the world Dima had known, the world he and Lena had so carefully built, crumbled around him. He felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath him, leaving him in free fall, lost in a void of grief and despair. In the days that followed, Dima retreated into himself, consumed by a grief so profound that it threatened to swallow him whole. The farmhouse, once a place of warmth and joy, now felt like a tomb, echoing with the ghosts of what could have been. The nursery, once a symbol of hope, now stood empty, a painful reminder of the life that was never to be. Dima wandered the fields aimlessly, his once strong hands now trembling with the weight of loss. The vibrant colors of the countryside seemed muted, the once soothing sounds of nature now a cruel reminder of the life that continued around him, indifferent to his suffering. Nights were the hardest. Alone in the bed he had once shared with Lena, Dima would stare at the ceiling, replaying every moment of their life together, every dream they had shared, now shattered. The silence was deafening, and the loneliness unbearable. Friends and neighbors tried to reach out, offering their condolences and support, but Dima pushed them away. He couldn't bear the pity in their eyes. The hollow words meant to comfort, but that only deepened his sense of isolation. He withdrew from the world, shutting himself off from the life that continued around him. Months passed in a blur of sorrow, and Dima became a shell of the man he once was. He went through the motions of daily life, tending to the fields, maintaining the farmhouse, but his heart was no longer in it. The joy he once found in the simple pleasures of life had been replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. One night, as a heavy storm raged outside, Dima found himself lying in bed, unable to sleep. The wind howled through the trees, and rain pounded against the windows, mirroring the turmoil in his soul. He closed his eyes, hoping for the sweet release of sleep, when suddenly there was a loud, insistent knock at the door. Startled, Dima sat up, his heart racing. It was late, far too late for visitors, especially in such a storm. The knocking continued, more urgent this time, and Dima knew he couldn't ignore it. He made his way to the door, his mind racing with possibilities. When he opened it, he was met with a sight that took his breath away. Standing on his doorstep, drenched to the bone and shivering from the cold, was a young woman holding a baby in her arms. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, her lips trembling as she struggled to speak. Without thinking, Dima reached out, guiding them inside, out of the storm. The woman's relief was palpable as she stepped into the warmth of the house, clutching the baby tightly to her chest. Dima quickly stoked the fire, the flames flickering to life and casting a warm glow across the room. He handed the woman a blanket, helping her wrap it around herself and the baby. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the farmhouse, a fragile sense of peace began to take hold. Dima prepared a simple meal, offering the young woman food and something warm to drink. She ate slowly, her hands shaking as she held the spoon, but there was a look of gratitude in her eyes that touched something deep within Dima. As they sat by the fire, the woman finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She told Dima that she had been on the run, fleeing from something she could barely put into words. The baby, she explained, was not hers by birth, but she had taken him in when his mother, her best friend, passed away. She had been trying to protect him, to keep him safe, but had nowhere left to turn. Dima listened quietly, his heart aching for the young woman and the baby. He didn't ask for more details, sensing that she wasn't ready to share them. Instead, he simply offered her a place to rest, telling her she could stay as long as she needed. That night, as Dima lay in bed, he found himself unable to sleep once more. But this time, it wasn't the storm outside that kept him awake. It was the unexpected sense of purpose that had begun to stir within him. The faint glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, his life wasn't as empty as he had believed. Little did he know that hope would soon be tested in ways he could never have imagined, as fate prepared to deliver yet another cruel twist to his already battered soul. The storm outside had subsided, leaving the night still and eerily quiet. Dima had finally drifted into a light sleep, his thoughts lingering on the young woman and the baby now resting in his home. But his rest was short-lived. In the dead of night, he awoke to the unmistakable scent of smoke. Panic surged through him as he realized that something was terribly wrong. He jumped out of bed, his heart pounding in his chest as he raced down the hallway. The acrid smell of burning would fill the air, and he could see the flickering orange glow of flames through the cracks in the door. The house was on fire. Without a second thought, Dima bolted towards the room where the young woman and the baby were sleeping. The flames were spreading quickly, already licking at the walls and ceiling. He burst into the room, shouting for the woman to wake up. But the smoke was thick, choking the air, and she didn't stir. Desperation clawed at Dima as he rushed to the bed. He grabbed the baby first, wrapping him in a blanket to shield him from the heat and smoke. Then he turned to the woman, shaking her awake. Her eyes fluttered open, but she was weak and disoriented, unable to move. The fire was closing in on them, and Dima knew he had to act fast. He hoisted the woman into his arms, her body limp against him as he carried her towards the door. But just as they reached the hallway, a beam from the ceiling collapsed in front of them, blocking their path with a wall of flames that Dima's heart sank. The fire was too intense, and there was no way out. He looked down at the woman, her face pale and eyes barely open. She mouthed something to him, her voice lost in the roar of the flames. He could see the fear in her eyes, the plea for him to save the baby. With a heavy heart, Dima made the hardest decision of his life. He knew he couldn't save them both. He wrapped the baby tighter in the blanket, holding him close to his chest, and made a dash through the flames. The heat was unbearable, searing his skin as he pushed forward with all his strength. They burst through the front door and out into the cool night air. Dima collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, the baby still clutched tightly in his arms. He turned back towards the house, but the flames were too fierce, the fire consuming everything in its path. There was no going back. As the reality of the situation sank in, tears streamed down Dima's face. He had lost everything, his home, his dreams, and now another innocent life. The grief threatened to overwhelm him, but as he looked down at the baby, now crying softly in his arms, he knew he couldn't give up. This child needed him, and he was all the baby had left in the world. In the days that followed, Dima buried the young woman next to his wife, Lena, in a small, quiet corner of the countryside. The loss weighed heavily on him, a fresh wound added to the scars of his past. But as he stood by the graves, the baby cradled in his arms, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't alone anymore. This child had come into his life in the most unexpected way, and he was determined to honor the memory of those he had lost by giving the baby the best life he could. Dima named the baby Michael, a name that seemed fitting for a child who had survived so much in his short life. Raising Michael gave Dima a reason to wake up each day, a reason to keep going despite the darkness that had surrounded him for so long. The farmhouse had been reduced to ashes, but Dima found solace in the simple routines of caring for Michael, finding joy in the small milestones of the baby's development. As Michael grew, so did Dima's attachment to the child. He marveled at the boy's resilience, his innocent laughter a balm to Dima's wounded soul. The fields that had once been a source of sorrow now became a place of play and exploration for Michael, with Dima watching over him, guiding him through the world. Years passed, and Michael blossomed into a bright, energetic child, full of curiosity and kindness. He was Dima's pride and joy, the light that had pulled him out of the depths of despair. The two of them formed a bond that went beyond the traditional roles of father and son. They were a team, facing the world together, supporting each other in ways that only they could understand. One day, as Dima and Michael were working in the fields, a familiar figure appeared on the horizon. It was Julia, an old friend of Dima's from the village, someone he hadn't seen in years. She approached with a warm smile, her presence a welcome surprise in their quiet life. Julia had returned to the village after the passing of her own husband, seeking the comfort of familiar faces and the peace of the countryside. She and Dima quickly rekindled their friendship, and she became a regular visitor to the farm. Michael took an instant liking to her, and soon, Julia became like a second mother to him. The three of them spent more and more time together, with Julia helping Dima with the chores and teaching Michael new things. As the days turned into weeks and then months, a new dynamic began to form. Julia brought a sense of warmth and stability to their lives, and Dima found himself smiling more often, the weight of his past sorrows slowly lifting. As Michael grew older, Dima's love for him deepened, but so did his fear of losing him. He had already lost so much in his life, and the thought of something happening to Michael was more than he could bear. So when Michael fell ill one cold winter's night, Dima's world was thrown into turmoil. Michael had been complaining of a headache and a sore throat, but by the time Dima realized how serious it was, Michael's fever had spiked dangerously high. Panicking, Dima rushed to Julia's house, waking her with urgent knocks on her door. Without hesitation, Julia grabbed her coat and they bundled Michael into her car, speeding towards the nearest hospital. The drive through the stormy night was harrowing, the roads slick with ice and visibility near zero. Dima held Michael in his arms, his heart pounding with fear as he whispered desperate prayers. Julia kept her focus on the road, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel, navigating through the treacherous conditions. When they finally arrived at the hospital, Dima was on the verge of collapse, both from exhaustion and terror. The doctors took Michael into the emergency room, and all Dima could do was wait, pacing the floors, racked with worry. Julia stayed by his side, her presence a calming force in the midst of the storm. Hours passed before the doctor finally emerged with news. Michael's fever had broken, and he was going to be okay. The relief that washed over Dima was overwhelming, and he broke down in tears, clutching Julia's hand as she comforted him. It was a moment that brought them even closer, their bond strengthened by the shared fear of losing someone they both loved. With Michael on the mend, life began to return to normal, but something had changed between Dima and Julia. The near tragedy had made them realize how much they meant to each other, how much they had come to rely on one another for strength and support. Their friendship had blossomed into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. As Michael recovered, Dima and Julia spent more time together, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. They laughed together, shared stories, and slowly, a new kind of love began to take root in their hearts. It was a love born of shared experiences, of mutual respect and admiration, and of a deep understanding of each other's pain and joy. One sunny afternoon, while Michael was playing in the fields, Dima and Julia sat on the porch of the newly rebuilt farmhouse, watching him with smiles on their faces. Dima turned to Julia, his heart full of gratitude and affection, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. He took her hand in his, and in that simple gesture, they both knew that they were no longer alone in this world. A few months later, Dima and Julia were married in a small, intimate ceremony, with Michael as their ring bearer. The boy, now full of life and energy, was the happiest he had ever been, his family finally complete. Together, the three of them built a new life, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a brighter future. With Dima and Julia by his side, Michael grew up in an environment filled with love, support, and a strong sense of purpose. As he reached adolescence, his curiosity about the world outside their small town intensified. He was a bright and ambitious young man, determined to make something of himself. Dima and Julia, having seen the potential in him, encouraged his dreams, guiding him every step of the way. From a young age, Michael had a natural aptitude for business. He would often accompany Dima to the market, observing how transactions were made and learning the value of hard work. Dima, sensing Michael's keen interest, began teaching him the basics of managing finances, investments, and the importance of ethical business practices. These lessons were invaluable and laid the foundation for Michael's future endeavors. After finishing high school with top honors, Michael received a scholarship to attend a prestigious university in the city. It was a bittersweet moment for Dima and Julia, who were proud of his achievements but saddened by the thought of him leaving home. Michael reassured them that he would stay connected and return home often, as he valued their support and love more than anything else. At university, Michael immersed himself in his studies, majoring in business administration with a focus on entrepreneurship. He quickly distinguished himself as one of the brightest students in his class, known for his innovative ideas and strong work ethic. However, his journey was not without challenges. Michael faced intense competition and the pressures of living up to the expectations of his professors and peers. Despite this, he remained grounded, drawing strength from the lessons his parents had taught him. During his second year at university, Michael had the opportunity to intern at a renowned investment firm. It was there that he truly began to understand the intricacies of the business world. Under the mentorship of seasoned professionals, Michael honed his skills in analyzing markets, making sound investments, and identifying lucrative business opportunities. His performance during the internship was so impressive that the firm offered him a job upon graduation. But Michael had bigger dreams. Inspired by his upbringing and the struggles his family had overcome, he decided to start his own business. He wanted to create something that would not only provide financial success, but also make a positive impact on the community. With the support of Dima and Julia, who encouraged him to follow his heart, Michael launched a small startup focused on sustainable farming and eco-friendly agricultural products. The early days were tough. Michael poured his heart and soul into the business, often working long hours and facing numerous setbacks. But he refused to give up. He was determined to build something meaningful, something that would honor the memory of the young woman who had brought him into Dima's life and the love and care that Dima and Julia had shown him. Slowly but surely, Michael's business began to grow. His commitment to quality and ethical practices earned him a loyal customer base, and word of mouth spread. Investors began to take notice of his innovative approach to sustainable farming, and soon, Michael secured the funding needed to expand his operations. As the business flourished, so did Michael's reputation. He became known as a visionary entrepreneur, a young man with a deep sense of responsibility to the environment and his community. His success allowed him to give back to the town that had raised him, funding scholarships for local students, and investing in infrastructure projects that improved the quality of life for everyone. Throughout his journey, Michael never forgot the lessons Dima and Julia had instilled in him. He remained humble, always remembering the value of hard work, integrity, and the importance of family. Even as his wealth and influence grew, he made sure to stay connected to his roots, often visiting Dima and Julia at their new home in town. One day, after years of hard work and perseverance, Michael stood on the steps of his newly built corporate headquarters, overlooking the thriving company he had created. It was a moment of reflection, a testament to how far he had come from the days of running through the fields of Dima's farm. He realized that his success was not just his own. It was a culmination of the love, guidance, and support he had received from his parents. Now a multi-billionaire, Michael was not only a successful businessman, but also a beloved figure in the community. He had achieved more than he had ever imagined, but his greatest pride was knowing that he had made Dima and Julia proud. He had honored their sacrifices and built a legacy that would carry their values forward for generations to come. As Michael stood there, he knew that his journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face and new heights to reach. But with the strength of his family behind him, he was ready for whatever the future held. He turned back towards the town, where Dima and Julia were waiting for him, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come full circle, and now it was his turn to ensure that their final years were filled with the same love and care they had given him throughout his life. As the years passed, Michael grew into a fine young man, full of ambition and kindness. Dima and Julia supported him in every way they could, and Michael never forgot the sacrifices they had made for him. When he became a successful businessman, he made sure that his parents were taken care of, building them a beautiful home in the town where they could enjoy their old age in comfort and happiness. And as Dima and Julia sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset with Michael by their side, they knew that they had been given a second chance at happiness, a chance they had never thought possible. Their story was one of love, loss, and redemption, a testament to the power of family and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a new beginning. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.